Hello, welcome to Neurodifference, the podcast where we explore the lived realities of neurodivergent individuals, amplify underrepresented voices, and challenge mainstream narratives. I'm Rhys Jenkins, and today we're taking a critical look at something that shapes public opinion more than we often realize: the media. When you picture a neurodivergent character, who comes to mind? A genius, a quirky outsider, or someone silent and mysterious? For me personally, someone quirky and unexpected comes to mind. Media has shaped these images, but do they reflect reality? How are neurodivergent people portrayed on screen, in the news, in books, and on social media? Are these representations harmful or helpful, or somewhere in between? And more importantly, who gets to tell these stories? This is what we will be exploring in today's podcast. And we'll start with a brief history of neurodivergence in the media. For decades, neurodivergent characters have been either invisible or portrayed through a narrow lens. From the trope to the tragic burden, media portrayals have often leaned on stereotypes rather than real experiences. Few examples of this. Rain Man, 1988, featured Raymond, an autistic savant. This film introduced many to autism, but reinforced the myth that all autistic people have extraordinary talents, whilst also being emotionally distant. The Big Bang Theory's Sheldon Cooper, never explicitly labeled, but widely interpreted as autistic, often the butt of jokes and lacking emotional depth. Sheldon, along with Raymond, are two of the most famous examples of autistic characters on screen, or characters who are portrayed as autistic. Yet they are two, in my opinion, of the most inaccurate portrayals of autistic people. The curious incident of the dog in the nighttime offers some insight, but written by a neurotypical author, which has drawn critique for a lack of authentic voice by neurodiverse or autistic people themselves. Channel 4's The A Word received praise for tackling autism in a family context, though some felt it focused too much on how difficult the diagnosis was for the parents rather than on the experience of the autistic child. There's a theme, you might notice a theme of inaccuracy here. And it's backed up by a quote of Dr. Damian Milton, and he describes portrayals like these as othering, saying they highlight difference for entertainment without offering true insight into the neurodivergent experience. We also need to talk about the inspirational narrative. This is when neurodivergent people are often celebrated for doing everyday things simply because they're disabled or different. It turns people into feel-good stories for neurotypical audiences rather than respecting their autonomy or reality. I find that when someone is when a neurotypical is describing a situation in this way, I find it very tricky to identify, due to that neurotypical person's different social rules and conventions, why they're saying what they are saying. However, there are examples of when media gets it right. Extraordinary Attorney Wu gained international attention for its portrayal of an autistic lawyer. While many viewers celebrated its visibility and emotional storytelling, critics pointed out that it leaned heavily into the savant stereotype, reinforcing the idea that value comes from exceptional abilities rather than who somebody is. This illustrates how even well-meaning shows can fall short without lived experience input. But it's not all bad news. In recent years, we've started to see more authentic, diverse, and respectful portrayals, often driven by neurodivergent creators themselves. I think involving neurodivergent individuals in production of films, TV, and media to be extremely important. And I would like to take this opportunity to credit my co-writer Malona Betts, for whom this from whom this script came from. Malona is neurodiverse, and I thank her very, very much for her great work. Not that I'm biased. There are even more examples of this kind of media. Everything's Gonna Be Okay on Freeform. It features Kayla Cromer, an autistic actress playing an autistic character. And what's especially important here is that Cromer brings her lived experience to the role, challenging the trend of neurotypical actors portraying autistic characters. The show Pablo on CBeebies, created and voiced by autistic adults. And this children's show is both educational and validating for young neurodivergent viewers. It uses Pablo's imagination to explain his world in a way that's accessible to both children and adults. I believe that this is especially important for teaching kids as well as adults about autistic people's behaviors. Chris Packham's BBC documentaries. These feature a respected public figure exploring his own experience with autism. His documentaries blend environmental storytelling with self-reflection and advocacy. YouTubers like Portrayals and ADHD Love. These characters normalize everyday neurodivergent life while discussing serious topics with honesty, humor, and lived authority. They offer representation beyond mainstream platforms, which I think, given how many people listen to podcasts, especially these days, is very important. And these stories involve neurodivergent people not just in front of the camera, but behind it, in the writer's room, in production, and in consultation, something that is extremely important to us here at Neurodifference. Good representation, I think, is nuanced. Not every character has to be a hero or a victim. Good media also shows neurodivergent people as full, complex humans, not walking diagnoses. It includes their voices, perspectives, and real-world challenges and triumphs. It doesn't rely solely on a character's diagnosis to define them. They're allowed to have romance, humor, anger, and complexity. Let's not forget the role of reality TV and documentaries. Programs like The Undateables have been praised for raising awareness, but they often frame neurodivergent people through a lens of pity, romantic struggle, or quirkiness, rather than as fully autonomous individuals. When the tone slips into voyeurism, it reinforces the idea that neurodivergent love is an oddity or an exception. As a participant on this show, especially the first time, I agree with this assertion. I felt the show highlighted what made me different to a certain extent. My unusual knowledge of James Bond, for example. I know far too much about James Bond. I felt the show kind of focused on that. I believe it's a topic for another podcast, I'm afraid. In terms of representation, whose voice is heard? Representation is only meaningful when it's authentic and diverse. We must ask, who is telling the story? Whose experience is being centered? Is it the neurotypical's view of autism and neurodiversity, or the autistic or neurodiverse person's view? A few things to watch out for. Are neurodivergent characters played by neurodivergent actors? Are there women and older adults with neurodivergent identities? Are creators involving people with lived experience or speaking for them? Individuals with conditions like dyspraxia, OCD, Tourette's, dyslexia, bipolar disorder, and complex PTSD are still underrepresented in mainstream storytelling. I believe that it has been this way for a very long time. When these voices are missing, the media reinforces a narrow image of what it means to be neurodivergent. Also consider how few neurodivergent characters exist in children's programming. Outside of shows like Pablo, most characters are neurotypical, and neurodivergent kids rarely get to see someone like themselves navigating everyday life. I think that there is a tremendous opportunity here to show kids what it is like being autistic and neurodiverse. So where does this leave us? Media is very powerful. We all know this. It informs how we're seen, how we see ourselves, and how we imagine our future. When neurodivergent people are reduced to tropes or inspiration pieces, it doesn't just limit stories, it limits empathy. But the tide is changing. We're starting to see more neurodivergent creators reclaiming the narrative, telling their own stories, and demanding better from publishers, producers, and platforms. And that is the future that we want to see. Representation that is honest, human, and unapologetically real. So what can you do? Seek out content by neurodivergent creators and support their work. Question portrayals that feel flat, offensive, or overly simplistic. Share media that gets it right and celebrate those doing the work well. If you're unsure where to start, I recommend following one new neurodivergent creator, whether it be on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, any platform. Or recommend a film or a book about a autistic or neurodiverse character. If you're in media or storytelling, always keep asking, who's missing from the table? Remember, we don't need perfection, but we do need progress. By doing all of this, I believe that you are giving society a chance to see neurodivergent people for who they truly are. And that is one of Neurodifference's main goals. So, I'd like to ask, who are your favorite neurodivergent creators or shows that really nailed it? What portrayals have you found that have been unhelpful or harmful? We would absolutely love to hear your take. Message us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram under Neurodifference Podcast, or use the hashtag Neurodifference Podcast to join the conversation. Please feel free to get in touch, especially on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks for tuning in to Neurodifference. Next time, we're going into the history and makeup of the National Autistic Society. Until then, keep questioning what you see, keep telling your truth, and together we'll keep making a positive neurodifference.